Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our free information session on Government Relations 101. My name is Melissa Caouette, and I'm the founder of Pocket Lobbyist. Pocket Lobbyist is an online subscription resource that was started just over 2 years ago that aims to make it easier for any individual or organization to anticipate, interpret, and mitigate political risk in Alberta and Canada. We have an amazing service offering called Government Relations 101, and today we're going to talk about how that will help you and your organization be prepared for all of the political risks that are inherent in happening across Canada and Alberta. One of the main things that we always say at Pocket Lobbyist is that political risk is organization risk. We often hear people believe politics is separate from their organization, but really our goal is to get everybody to understand that political risk is just the same as accounting risk, human resource risk, marketing risk, financial risk, and any other risk that you would anticipate and mitigate within your organization, which is just the same for politics. Now, if you've been paying attention in the news, you're no stranger to all of the different changes and dynamics that are happening, not just in Alberta, but across Canada and North America, which all contribute to political risks that are relevant to organizations. And today we're going to get into talking about just a few of those before we talk about our GR 101 offering that starts on September 19th. Now, if you're an organization in Alberta, you're probably aware of the legislative cycle. The next session legislatively in Alberta begins on October 28th and will be filled with several pieces of legislation that may impact your organization. So all of the different announcements that were made during the last provincial election and legislation that follows on from previous legislative sessions, expect that coming up on October 28th. And if you are an organization that has any sort of legislative overlap, being aware and engaged on what's happening in this year's session is going to be really important for your organization as a political risk and organizational risk. When we look at political risk, we're also looking at financial risk. So as we near budget 2025, which will likely be some point in February, late February or early March, we know that organizations are working diligently to ensure that their budget submissions are prepared and submitted to relevant ministries. And then there's a lot of work that happens around budget submissions. You don't just simply prepare one and submit one and think that you're going to get everything that you're going to get. So that's another political risk that we hope that you're aware of for this fall. Now, we just received updates in August on how Alberta's finances are doing in the Q1 fiscal update. While Alberta's finances look relatively positive, there is a lot of legislation that's been introduced over the last couple of years that really limits and directs how the government of Alberta can spend its finances. And so that's something to be aware of as an organization as you're looking to receive money in budget 2025. We also have a leadership review coming up in Alberta. The United Conservative Party conducts a regular leadership review in non-election years every 3 years, and Premier Danielle Smith will face a leadership review at the AGM this year in early November. Now, there's no indications that Premier Smith is at risk of not passing that leadership review. But if you are at all familiar with elections in Alberta, you know that elections are almost the time where the least amount of change happens. A lot of times, the fundamental changes in leaderships are happening at the party level. And so this is something to be quite aware of. As well, in the context of there being a new NDP leader with Naheed Nenshi, who does not yet have a seat. And so that'll be another legislative risk in terms of how Nenshi is representing NDP in the legislature without a seat. We expect a by-election at some point, but we don't know when that will be at this time. We also have a lot happening federally in Canada. So if you're paying attention in the news, you know that the confidence in supply agreement that the federal Liberals and federal NDP had is no more. While the federal parliament goes back on Monday, we know that there is heightened anticipation of a federal election. It is supposed to happen on October 20th of 2025, so just over a year away. But again, the risk that we are seeing from the confidence agreement, supply and confidence agreement being no more, coupled with struggles in polling and leadership on the federal Liberal side is something to watch, because if your organization has goals and objectives that overlap with provincial and federal priorities, we are now in a state where things could change at any moment. And so being aware of that political risk for your organization becomes more and more important as every single passing day goes on. Now, when we think of all these different political risks, I want to ask you whether or not you feel that your organization is prepared to handle these risks. And these are just the risks that we can anticipate are happening because they're in the news and of public record. That's not even to mention all of the risks that are unknown unknowns, maybe to you or your organization, if you're not necessarily feeling proficient or skilled in the area of government relations and lobbying. There are so many things that could happen on the horizon that you're only going to be able to prepare for if you're able to identify them. At Pocket Lobbyist, we're always talking about anticipating, interpreting, and mitigating political risk, and being prepared to handle each and every one of those elements is extraordinarily important, especially if you are an organization that depends on government funding or is highly regulated or has a lot of interconnectedness with government. So I want to just ask you whether or not you feel that you're prepared to handle these risks. If you feel that you are not necessarily prepared or as prepared as you could be to handle these risks, may I suggest taking consideration of building that kind of political risk mitigation capacity within your organization. Whether or not you are hiring a lobbyist or hiring an individual or working with Pocket Lobbyist, you need to understand how to mitigate these risks within your organization. And in order to do so, you need to have the capacity to do so. You can do that by hiring an employee. So you can go to market to hire somebody who will be an internal person within your organization that will monitor these things, that will advise you, that will ensure that the organization is protected against some of these risks, which is a solution that a lot of people do and organizations do go with. The only thing to be aware of is that if you're hiring an employee, this is a very specialized skill set. There are not a ton of people in the job market that have this kind of background and expertise. And so you're really limited in terms of the pool of people that you can access. You're also probably looking at quite a senior executive because it is a very high demand, high skill set profession, which means that you're probably going to have significant budget to hire somebody who's going to be effective to you in your organization. And also, there are limitations and restrictions that come with people who are hired by an organization if they have come from government or have any sort of restrictions. And so you may be limited with how much that individual is able to support you with internally. Again, you could look at hiring an external consultant, which is typically a lobbyist or a government relations professional. This is a solution that a lot of people do use because it's flexible. You can hire somebody when you need them and not have them when you don't need them. But the problem that many organizations face in hiring a lobbyist or a consultant to handle their government relations work is that it can be quite expensive. And this is an external person to your organization. This person does not know your organization, no matter how skilled and how much expertise they have. They're not in your organization like an employee would be. And so it is always going to be somebody that is coming in from the outside to help advise as best they can. And again, a lobbyist or a consultant is not a band-aid solution to fix all of your problems. You have to be a good communicator. You have to understand what your priorities are, and you have to be reasonable about what you expect an external lobbyist is able to do in a short and long period of time being external from your organization. So if you are thinking that hiring somebody or engaging a lobbyist is not necessarily within your budget or within your timelines, or if you already have those functions and still feel like your organization could benefit from this kind of expertise, may we suggest that you consider enrolling in our GR 101 fall cohort. Our Government Relations 101 cohort is a very innovative professional development opportunity that allows anybody within an organization to develop the skills required to really anticipate, interpret, and mitigate political risks within the organization. This cohort, unlike some of the other options, is affordable, it is also attainable, and it is accessible. So affordable in the sense that it's at a much lower price point than any of these other options are. It is accessible to anybody at any skill level. If you're a junior employee or a senior executive, you're going to find some benefit in this option. And it is delivered online, virtually, and all materials are accessible to students and participants forever. So you'll always be able to refer back to the materials that you learn in the cohort forevermore. Now, if you think that this is an interesting idea in theory, but you're not quite convinced yet, maybe you're thinking to yourself, I am not a lobbyist. Well, may I suggest to you that you probably are a lobbyist. Lobbying is a much simpler formula than people think. Lobbying is not a fancy title or some special designation. Lobbying is simply the act of communicating with a public office holder in an attempt to influence. So whether or not you call yourself a lobbyist, if you are talking to the government, advocating in any way for yourself or a client on a public policy issue, a financial issue, a legislative issue, you're already a lobbyist. So why not make sure that you're doing that role in a way that's effective and impactful for your organization or your clients? Maybe you're thinking that lobbying is a shady and corrupt business and you'd like to stay as far away from it as possible. This is a critique that I hear quite often, and it's one at Pocket Lobbyist that we're super committed to dispelling. If you think that, you're probably watching movies like Thank You for Smoking, where you see lobbyists depicted like Nick Naylor is in the clip below here. And you're probably thinking, I don't want to be associated with lobbying for an industry that I don't agree with or a cause that I don't agree with. But that's not what lobbying is. Lobbying is not an inappropriate connection to politicians or their staff. It's not about having significant financial power or influence or the ability to manipulate or intimidate others. It's also not about exchanging massive amounts of money just to get a seat at the table or connect with your friends in government. While the United States is a different lobbying environment, Canada has several different laws and regulations that regulate this activity, and that's not really the case in Canada anymore. As I've said in the previous slides, lobbying is communicating with a public office holder directly or indirectly in an attempt to influence, which means that you are probably a lobbyist, even if you don't admit it. Lobbying is something that has been in place forever. In this slide, we talk about lobbying under President Ulysses S. Grant, where the term lobbying is thought to have come from, where people would sit in the lobby of the Willard Hotel and attempt to talk to President Grant. It's also a term that is sourced from members of parliament in Great Britain, where officials would sit in the halls and people would try to talk to them. And even if you look back in historical examples in terms of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, the idea of wanting to talk to and communicate with people who are making decisions is a practice as old as time. And so it is not a corrupt practice, especially when regulated and done in an ethical way. And we'd encourage you to change the way that you think about it. As you can see, many different industries are lobbying for what many people would agree are worthy causes. And so it's something that is not universally good or bad, like anything in business. When we look at lobbying, it's a regulated activity. You must have a deep understanding of history and knowledge of political and government systems. You also need insights and experience on how to deal with people and communicate effectively. You also need to be a strategic planner and have the ability to develop and execute plans and take action with what you want to achieve. This is all anticipating, interpreting, and managing business risk as it relates to politics and public policy. And these are skills that everybody can use and develop within their organization in a small or big way. If you're thinking that lobbying is exclusive and therefore it's a club that you don't belong in, think again. Lobbyists are everywhere. These are thousands of registrations just in Alberta alone, and that's not even counting how many there are across Canada and in other jurisdictions. And so lobbying is an activity that is everywhere, that is maybe just not talked about to the extent or degree that you think it is, but it is not an exclusive group, and it is not just for a few people who are involved in politics and connected at the political levels. You can be a lobbyist as well. So that's where Government Relations 101, our cohort program, comes in. Now, for those of you familiar with Pocket Lobbyist, you know that we have a monthly membership that allows you access to briefing notes, trackers, templates, endless resources that help you execute your role as a government relations or lobbying professional. Now, one of the things that we heard years ago when we had started Pocket Lobbyist is that people wanted a guide on how to use all of the resources that we produced on the platform. And so that's why we developed Government Relations 101. I am the one who teaches the cohort, and I didn't really see any examples of professional development in this field that gave the kind of practical advice by a practicing person, which is me. I am a lobbyist and have clients and do this work each and every day. I saw there was a gap, and so I thought that this would be a really valuable resource for people who wanted to get the kind of advice and insights on how I or any other highly skilled lobbyist or government relations professional does their job, because those are skills that are easily teachable, but you need to be aware of what to do in order to have direction to be successful. We want you to be able to make educated guesses on what could happen in terms of when you read something in the news, what are the implications? That's interpreting all of the risks that are inherent in politics and public policy. And more than just anticipating what could happen and understanding what that might mean for your organization, knowing what you're going to do about it. How are you going to mitigate that? Are you going to do something? Are you going to do nothing? The point here is that you're making an educated and informed decision on how you're going to move ahead based on the risk analysis that you've been able to do with the skills that you've developed in GR 101. Now, GR 101 is unique in that it really does fit several different types of individuals and organizations. We've had nonprofits, lobbyists themselves, corporate individuals, government officials, municipal, as well as advocacy groups that participate in our previous cohort programs. And all of them are able to take something from this program that allows them to do their job in a way that's impactful and beneficial. Because the reality is the way that you lobby is not that much different from a nonprofit to a large organization. It just looks different, but the fundamentals are always the same and include you understanding how to shape public policy in an invaluable way for long-term sustainable results that end up getting wins for your organization, as well as working within the defined scope that the government has set out. With Government Relations 101, you're getting over 12 hours of live virtual discussion, over 6 models, and those are all being developed strategically by our team of experts over the past year. This will be our 3rd time doing the cohort, and we improve it every single time. We also make sure that you have access to recordings and templates, downloads, and any supplementary resources that are going to help you be the best lobbyist and government relations professional that you can be, and you'll have access to those materials forever. We also provide ongoing professional advice and support on public policy and communications throughout the cohort, including office hours that you're able to attend to ask questions and seek clarification, as well as networking opportunities with peers and colleagues in the field so that you can grow your network and learn from others that are doing this work as well. So our next cohort starts on September 19th, and we start off with political history. We get into the dynamics of how government and politics work, including how decision makers and influencers happen within and external to government, as well as how to lobby and do government relations, especially when it comes to developing and executing a strategy. So we take our time over 6 weeks, and we provide you with all of the resources that you need to excel at each stage here. And we do it for an investment of just $2,500, which is a fraction of what most monthly government engagements are with lobbyists. And so we really encourage you to sign up to the cohort before September 19th. You'll get an email right after this webinar is done, directing you to do so. Otherwise, you can go to pocketlobbyist.com/cohort or email us at hello@pocketlobbyist.com if you have any questions or concerns. We are so excited about this next cohort and spreading the knowledge and skills and expertise that we have as a team to anybody who wants to be more proficient in this area. We truly believe that this is a secret weapon for any organization that has any sort of interaction with government or public policy. And so we encourage you to consider investing in this kind of development so that your organization is prepared to anticipate, interpret, and mitigate political risk like a pro. So we really appreciate you being here today. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions. We have a free newsletter that you can sign up with, or again, you can email us at hello@pocketlobbyist.com. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Next cohort starts on September 19th and spots are limited. So please do sign up as soon as you can if you're interested in saving your spot. Thank you all so much. And we hope to see you in the cohort and following us on social media and on our newsletter. Thank you so much.